What if I told you that South Africa successfully moved 500 elephants across 1,000 kilometers of wilderness without losing a single animal? That they relocated entire elephant families, including newborn calves, across distances equivalent to moving elephants from New York to Florida? It sounds like an impossible logistical nightmare, right? Like trying to coordinate the migration of a small city of the world's largest land mammals. Well, South Africa actually did this, and the results, after 5 years, exceeded every conservation expert's wildest expectations and revolutionized how the world approaches elephant management. This is that extraordinary story. But to understand why South Africa would attempt such a massive and seemingly impossible relocation project, we need to understand the critical elephant crisis they were facing. A crisis that threatened not only the elephants themselves, but entire ecosystems across southern Africa. Picture this: Kruger National Park, one of Africa's most famous wildlife reserves. Nearly 2 million hectares of pristine African wilderness, home to the Big Five and countless other species. For over a century, Kruger had been a sanctuary for African elephants fleeing hunting pressure and habitat destruction across the continent. By the 1990s, Kruger's elephant population had grown to over 17,000 individuals. That might sound like a conservation success story, but it was actually becoming an ecological disaster. The park's ecosystem had been designed by nature to support a maximum of about 7,000 elephants sustainably. Elephants are what scientists call ecosystem engineers. A single adult elephant can consume up to 300 kilograms of vegetation every day. They strip bark from trees, uproot entire plants, and transform forests into grasslands through their feeding behavior. In natural conditions, this creates beneficial habitat diversity. But with more than double the sustainable population, Kruger's elephants were destroying their own habitat faster than it could recover. Ancient baobab trees, some over 1,000 years old, were being killed by elephant damage. Rare plant species were disappearing. The delicate balance that had existed for millennia was collapsing. Other wildlife species were suffering as well. Rhinos, antelope, and countless smaller animals were losing their habitats as elephants consumed or destroyed the vegetation they depended on. The biodiversity that made Kruger special was declining rapidly. But the problem wasn't limited to Kruger. Across southern Africa, the same pattern was repeating in reserve after reserve. As human development consumed traditional elephant habitats, the animals were being concentrated into smaller and smaller protected areas. These areas were becoming ecological pressure cookers. The Addo Elephant National Park faced similar challenges. Originally established in 1931 to protect the last 11 elephants in the Eastern Cape, the park's conservation success had created new problems. By 2000, the elephant population had grown to over 350 individuals in an area that could sustainably support perhaps 150. Traditional solutions weren't adequate for the scale of the problem. Contraception programs for elephants were complex, expensive, and had limited effectiveness. Expanding park boundaries was often impossible due to human settlements and agricultural development. Culling programs had been discontinued due to ethical concerns and public opposition. Dr. Michelle Henley, a leading elephant researcher who would later play a crucial role in the relocation project, described the situation as a conservation paradox. Quote, "Our success in protecting elephants in small reserves was creating new threats to their long-term survival. We had saved the species, but were destroying the ecosystems they needed to thrive." The South African National Parks Organization faced an impossible choice: do nothing and watch elephant overpopulation destroy the very ecosystems the parks were meant to protect, reduce populations through culling, and face international condemnation and ethical concerns, or attempt something that had never been done before at this scale, relocating hundreds of elephants across vast distances to suitable habitat. By 2002, the decision was made to attempt the largest elephant translocation in history. The project was given the name Operation Phoenix, symbolizing the rebirth and renewal that successful relocation could bring to both source and destination ecosystems. But the challenges were staggering. How do you safely capture, transport, and release 500 of the world's largest and most intelligent land mammals? How do you keep elephant families together during the stress of relocation? How do you ensure they adapt to new environments hundreds of miles from their birth territories? The logistics alone seemed impossible. Adult bull elephants can weigh up to 6,000 kilograms. A specialized transport truck can carry only one adult elephant at a time. Moving 500 elephants would require hundreds of transport trips across some of Africa's most challenging terrain. The animal welfare concerns were equally daunting. Elephants have complex social structures and emotional bonds that rival those of humans. Separating families or causing psychological trauma could have devastating long-term consequences. Critics argued that the stress of capture and transport could kill animals or destroy their ability to function in new environments. International animal rights organizations were opposed from the beginning. They argued that elephants had a right to remain in their ancestral territories and that translocation was cruel manipulation of wild animals for human convenience. Protests and legal challenges threatened to shut down the project before it could begin. Dr. Rob Slotto, the conservation biologist who would lead Operation Phoenix, recalls the overwhelming skepticism they faced. Quote, "Everyone said it was impossible. Too many animals, too far to travel, too complex to coordinate. But we knew that doing nothing would mean watching elephants destroy themselves and their ecosystems." The planning phase took over 2 years and required coordination between multiple government agencies, conservation organizations, veterinarians, logistics companies, and local communities. Every aspect of the operation had to be carefully choreographed to ensure animal welfare while achieving conservation goals. The first challenge was developing new techniques for safely capturing and transporting large numbers of elephants. Traditional methods involved darting individual animals with tranquilizers, but this approach was too slow and stressful for mass relocations. The team developed innovative group capture techniques using helicopters to guide entire family units into temporary holding areas. Specialized equipment allowed them to quickly process multiple animals while keeping family groups together throughout the operation. Transport logistics required custom-designed vehicles and support systems. Each elephant transport truck was equipped with climate control, monitoring systems, and safety features. Medical teams accompanied every transport to respond to emergencies. GPS tracking allowed real-time monitoring of animal welfare during transport. But perhaps most importantly, the team developed protocols for maintaining elephant social structures throughout the relocation process. Mothers stayed with calves. Family matriarchs led their groups into new territories. The goal was to relocate intact elephant societies, not just individual animals. The destination areas were carefully selected based on habitat quality, carrying capacity, and local community support. Sites in the Eastern Cape, KwaZulu-Natal, and other provinces offered suitable elephant habitat that had been empty of elephants for decades or even centuries. Operation Phoenix began in earnest in 2003 with the first major elephant captures in Kruger National Park. The scale and complexity of the operation immediately became apparent. This wasn't just wildlife management. It was like relocating a small city of intelligent, emotional beings across vast distances. The capture process began before dawn each day, when elephants were most calm and temperatures were cooler. Helicopter pilots worked in coordination with ground teams to guide selected elephant families into temporary capture areas called bomas. These enclosures were designed to hold entire family units together while processing procedures were completed. Dr. Pete Morkel, the veterinarian who oversaw the medical aspects of the operation, described the first captures as both terrifying and magnificent. Quote, "Seeing a family of 12 elephants, from tiny calves to massive matriarchs, walking calmly into our capture facility was both humbling and inspiring. These animals seemed to understand that we were trying to help them. Each elephant received a comprehensive health examination, identification tags, and GPS tracking collars. Blood samples were taken for genetic analysis and disease screening. The processing had to be completed quickly to minimize stress, but thoroughly enough to ensure the health and safety of animals during transport. the transport phase presented unique challenges that had never been faced at this scale. Adult elephant bulls required the largest available trucks and specialized loading equipment. Mothers with young calves needed modified vehicles that could accommodate family groups. Every transport was essentially a custom engineering solution. The 1,000-kilometer journey from Kruger to destination sites in the Eastern Cape took 12 to 15 hours of continuous driving. Transport teams included veterinarians, animal behaviorists, and logistics specialists who monitored elephant welfare throughout the journey. Regular stops allowed for health checks and adjustments to ensure animal comfort. Dr. Audrey Delsink, who coordinated the transport logistics, recalls the extraordinary dedication required. Quote, "We had teams working around the clock for months at a time. Every elephant was someone's responsibility from capture through successful release. It was the most complex conservation operation any of us had ever attempted." The release process was equally critical to long-term success. Elephants couldn't simply be dropped off in new territory and expected to thrive. Release sites were prepared with water sources, suitable vegetation, and monitoring equipment. Local communities were educated about elephant behavior and conflict prevention. Family groups were released together in suitable habitat areas where they could establish new territories without competing with existing wildlife populations. GPS collars allowed researchers to track adaptation progress and intervene if problems developed. Supplemental feeding stations were established to ease the transition to new food sources. The first releases were watched anxiously by the entire conservation community. Would elephants adapt to new environments so far from their birth territories? Would family bonds survive the stress of relocation? Would they integrate successfully with existing wildlife populations? Initial results were mixed but encouraging. Some elephant families adapted quickly to their new homes, establishing territories and beginning to breed within the first year. Others struggled with the transition, requiring additional support and intervention from project teams. But by 2005, it was becoming clear that Operation Phoenix was achieving unprecedented success. Relocated elephant populations were not only surviving, but beginning to thrive in their new environments. Breeding rates were higher than expected. Mortality rates were lower than in the overcrowded source populations. More importantly, the ecosystem benefits were becoming apparent in both source and destination areas. In Kruger, reduced elephant pressure allowed vegetation recovery and improved habitat for other species. In the Eastern Cape, returning elephants were beginning to restore ecosystem processes that had been missing for over a century. The Addo Elephant National Park expansion became a showcase for successful elephant restoration. Relocated animals integrated seamlessly with the existing population, creating genetic diversity and social stability that benefited all elephants in the area. Tourist numbers increased dramatically as visitors came to see the expanded elephant populations. By 2007, Operation Phoenix had successfully relocated over 400 elephants in multiple phases. The logistical achievements were remarkable. 0 elephants lost during transport, minimal injuries, and family groups maintained throughout the process. The operation had proven that large-scale elephant translocation was not only possible, but could be highly successful. International recognition of the project's success began attracting delegations from across Africa and around the world. Countries with elephant management challenges wanted to learn from South Africa's innovations and adapt the techniques for their own conservation needs. The technological innovations developed for Operation Phoenix were being shared with conservation organizations globally. Improved capture techniques, specialized transport equipment, and post-release monitoring systems were helping elephant conservation efforts from Botswana to Kenya. But perhaps most importantly, the success was changing attitudes toward conservation intervention. The project demonstrated that bold, large-scale actions could achieve conservation results that traditional approaches couldn't match. It showed that human intervention, when properly planned and executed, could enhance rather than harm natural systems. Dr. Ian White, Kruger's elephant management specialist, reflected on the transformation. Quote, 5 years after the major relocations, we could see the ecosystem recovering in ways we hadn't seen for decades. Ancient trees were surviving again. Plant diversity was returning. The elephants we moved weren't just surviving. They were helping restore ecosystems that had been damaged by overuse. The economic impacts were equally impressive. Elephant ecotourism in destination areas increased dramatically, bringing millions of dollars in revenue to local communities. The Shamwari Game Reserve, one of the relocation sites, reported that elephant viewing became their primary tourist attraction, supporting hundreds of local jobs. International media coverage of Operation Phoenix attracted global attention to South African conservation efforts. The project became a symbol of innovative, ethical wildlife management that balanced animal welfare with ecosystem health. Documentary filmmakers, journalists, and researchers flocked to document the ongoing success. Conservation organizations worldwide began requesting technical assistance for their own elephant management challenges. South African expertise in large-scale wildlife translocation became a valuable export, supporting conservation efforts across Africa and generating revenue for continued research and development. The genetic benefits of the relocations were also becoming apparent through ongoing research. DNA analysis showed that relocated populations had successful breeding and were contributing valuable genetic diversity to destination populations. This was crucial for long-term elephant conservation in increasingly fragmented habitats. Climate change adaptation benefits were an unexpected bonus. As traditional elephant ranges faced increasing pressure from changing weather patterns, the establishment of new populations in climatically stable areas provided important backup populations for species survival. By 2010, the long-term results of Operation Phoenix were exceeding even the most optimistic projections. The relocated elephant populations had not only survived and adapted, but were thriving in ways that surprised researchers and conservationists worldwide. Population monitoring revealed that relocated elephants were breeding at rates higher than those in their original overcrowded habitats. Calf survival rates in the new territories were exceptional, with some family groups producing new calves every 2 years instead of the normal 3 to 4 year intervals seen in stressed populations. The ecosystem restoration effects were dramatic and visible. Satellite imagery showed vegetation recovery in former overcrowded areas and habitat enhancement in destination regions. The elephants were functioning as ecosystem engineers in their new homes, creating the habitat diversity that benefits countless other species. Dr. Graham Curley, who led the long-term monitoring studies, described the transformation as unprecedented in conservation science. Quote, "We documented over 200% increase in plant species diversity in areas where elephants were introduced. These animals weren't just living in their new homes, they were actively improving them." The Shamwari Game Reserve became an international showcase for successful elephant restoration. Visitors could observe elephant families that had been relocated from Kruger, adapting their behavior to different vegetation types, terrain, and climate conditions. The elephants were demonstrating the remarkable adaptability that had allowed their species to survive for millions of years. Behavioral studies revealed fascinating adaptations as elephants learned to navigate new environments. Family matriarchs developed new migration routes, discovered seasonal water sources, and established territories that optimize resource use. The elephants were essentially recolonizing habitats their ancestors had occupied centuries earlier. Social integration between relocated and existing elephant populations exceeded all expectations. Instead of competition and conflict, researchers documented cooperative behaviors, shared parenting of young calves, and the formation of extended family networks that strengthened both populations. The success attracted increasing international attention as elephant conservation challenges intensified across Africa. Countries facing human-elephant conflict, habitat loss, and population management issues began implementing programs based on Operation Phoenix techniques and lessons learned. Botswana launched a similar program to relocate elephants from the Okavango Delta to less populated areas. Kenya developed protocols for moving problem elephants from agricultural areas to protected reserves. Zimbabwe began planning large-scale relocations to restore elephant populations in former range areas. The technology and expertise developed through Operation Phoenix became a valuable conservation resource. South African teams provided training and technical assistance to elephant management programs across the continent. The knowledge transfer was helping save elephants and ecosystems from Senegal to Mozambique. Economic impact studies revealed that the conservation investment was generating substantial returns. Tourism revenue from elephant viewing in destination areas was generating over $50 million annually. Local communities that had initially been skeptical were becoming strong supporters as economic benefits became apparent. Employment creation was substantial and sustainable. Elephant monitoring, anti-poaching efforts, tourism services, and research activities provided hundreds of permanent jobs in rural areas where few other opportunities existed. The elephants had become economic engines for regional development. International recognition of the project's success continued to grow. Operation Phoenix received awards from conservation organizations, academic institutions, and government agencies worldwide. The project was featured in documentaries, scientific journals, and conservation conferences as a model for innovative wildlife management. Research applications were expanding beyond elephant conservation. The techniques developed for large-scale wildlife translocation were being adapted for other species management challenges. Rhino relocations, predator reintroductions, and habitat restoration programs were all benefiting from Operation Phoenix innovations. Climate change adaptation strategies increasingly incorporated the Operation Phoenix approach. As traditional species ranges shifted due to changing temperatures and precipitation patterns, the ability to relocate entire populations to suitable habitat was becoming crucial for conservation success. University research programs were established to study the long-term impacts and refine the techniques further. Students from around the world came to South Africa to learn elephant management, wildlife translocation, and ecosystem restoration. The project was training the next generation of conservation professionals. The psychological and social benefits for the elephants themselves were perhaps most remarkable. Long-term behavioral studies showed that relocated elephants exhibited normal stress hormones, successful reproduction, and typical social behaviors within 2 years of relocation. The animals had not just survived the experience, they had thrived. Family bonds that conservation critics feared would be destroyed by relocation actually appeared strengthened by the shared experience. Matriarchs who had led their families through the relocation process showed increased confidence and leadership effectiveness in their new territories. Genetic diversity studies confirmed that the relocations were contributing to species-wide conservation goals. Isolated elephant populations that had been declining due to inbreeding received genetic enrichment from relocated animals. This was particularly important for long-term species survival in fragmented landscapes. By 2015, Operation Phoenix had successfully relocated over 500 elephants in multiple phases across various sites. The project had become the gold standard for large-scale wildlife translocation and was inspiring similar programs on every continent. Innovation continued as new challenges and opportunities emerged. Advanced GPS tracking, satellite monitoring, and genetic analysis technologies were improving the precision and success rates of relocations. Real-time health monitoring systems were reducing the stress and risks associated with capture and transport. International collaboration was accelerating the sharing of knowledge and techniques. Conservation organizations, government agencies, and research institutions were working together to apply Operation Phoenix lessons to elephant conservation challenges worldwide. The project's success was also contributing to broader conservation philosophy debates. Operation Phoenix demonstrated that intensive management, when properly implemented, could enhance rather than harm natural systems. This was challenging traditional hands-off approaches to wildlife conservation. Economic sustainability had been achieved through diversified funding sources. Tourism revenue, international donor support, government investment, and research partnerships were providing stable long-term financing for continued elephant management and monitoring. Community support had grown from initial skepticism to enthusiastic endorsement as local people saw the economic, environmental, and cultural benefits of elephant restoration. Former critics had become project advocates who promoted elephant conservation in their communities. The transformation was complete. What had begun as a desperate attempt to solve elephant overpopulation problems had become a comprehensive model for landscape-scale conservation that was being replicated around the world. From 500 elephants moved across 1,000 kilometers to thriving populations supporting entire ecosystems, Operation Phoenix proved that bold conservation action could achieve results that seemed impossible. The project didn't just save elephants, it created a blueprint for conservation success that continues to inspire wildlife management worldwide. What other seemingly impossible wildlife conservation challenges do you think could be solved with similarly ambitious approaches? What other species might benefit from large-scale relocation and restoration programs? Let me know in the comments below.